Hello there. In this tutorial, I'm going to be using this car model to explain the Atlasflow add-on. I think it's a very good example because it is quite complex. It has rigged meshes, non-rigged meshes, textured materials, simple PBR materials, and by simple PBR, I mean materials that don't use any texture whatsoever, only default values and solid colors. And that's where the Atlasflow comes in very handy. The idea here is to be able to join all of these objects or as many as we can and still be able to maintain its original look and editing capabilities. That will help us reduce draw calls by a lot and simplify our material management. So to install the Atlas Flow, it's pretty straightforward. Just come to Edit, Preferences, Add-ons, and Install from disk. Once installed, it's going to show up right here. So as I mentioned, I want to be able to join these objects and be able to edit its PBR properties within a single material. So what I'm going to do here is join these objects together. And as you can see, they now have several materials here. And the UV channels are also grouped in the same object. So what I will do now is click to add the Atlas Flow material. But before we do that, let's just make sure which are the PBR properties that we want to be editing here. So base color is a must. We have several different base color values here. Let me just isolate this object. So we have yellow, black, dark gray. We have tones of blue, uh, other tones of yellow. And not only base color, metallic and roughness are also pretty obvious in this object here. And also we do have alpha values in the glass, and the body paint specifically is using a clear coat value that gives a better effect for car paint. So right now we only have base color in one atlas, metallic and roughness for another atlas, but we still need the alpha and the clear coat weight values. So I'm going to add a gray atlas here which is already using alpha and coat weight. I can change these properties to whatever property I want. Same with the color atlas. We can also choose different properties that need color values. So this is the properties that I want to be editing in this object. So now I'm good to click Add Atlas Flow Material. And what it did here, besides adding the Atlas Flow material itself, it also assigned the entire mesh to this material without changing how it looks, which for me, this is always super impressive. And it also added 3 new UV channels. Each of these UV channels is dedicated to a specific atlas. So it did not remove the previous UV channels, and it also kept the original materials. It's up to you to remove those or not. It depends on each case. But in our case here, we are good to actually remove this all. So there is an operator for that called clean. If you click clean, what that did is it not only deleted every other material here, but it also removed from the Blender file in case there were no other users for those materials. And it also removed the extra UV channels, keeping it totally dedicated to the Atlasflow workflow. So now, because the previous materials were already using all the properties that I wanted for this object is pretty much ready. But I'm going to be changing the PBR values here for this tutorial. So to change PBR values, we need to go to Edit mode. And right now, these options here are not clickable, neither these two operators here. So if we go to edit mode, these operations and values are now enabled. And the first tool that I want to talk about is the select by attribute. When you select a face and you click select by attribute, that is very similar to select by material, except that since right now we only have one material, we need this custom operation here to be able to select every face sharing the same PBR attributes. And by that, I mean sharing the same base color value, metallic value, roughness, alpha, and coat weight values. So if I click select by attribute, it's going to select every face sharing the same attributes. And now I could, for example, change colors. So for that, I'm just going to click here to show you how the color change works. When I'm changing color in the color picker, what is actually happening is the UV mapping of this specific mesh is actually changing across the color atlas texture, as you can notice there. So I'm going to put a tone of blue here, and the same is true for every other property here. For the second gray atlas, metallic and roughness, I'm going to be editing the UV position in this atlas, in this UV channel, which is the gray atlas. So if I change the metallic, I'm going to actually be changing the UVs horizontally. And if I change the roughness values here, I'm going to be changing the UVs vertically. Now this is an opaque mesh, and therefore I should keep alpha value as 1, but I'm just going to reduce it. And as you can see, this is now affected by a very strong alpha transparency. But I'm going to keep it 1, and I can also tweak the coat weight value. So right now coat weight is 0, but only for the paint of the car I want to be using 1. So everything else in the car has no coat weight, but the body paint does have. Now I want to be playing with emission. Let's say we have something here that needs emission. So I'm going to add a color atlas here. What it did was to add the necessary shader nodes for the color atlas. It also added an extra UV channel here. And I still need to connect this to something. I'm going to connect it to emission. And currently emission strength is set to 0. And although we can change emission color and all of these values per group of faces, the strength here is global to the entire material. So if I change the strength here, it's going to change for the entire object. So what we got to do here is in edit mode, we select everything. We change the emission color to 0, or actually to black, and that completely removes the emission effect. So let's say we only want to add emission to these two faces here in the front for some reason. So what I can do here is set an emission color, right? And the emission strength is set to 3. I can increase this strength or reduce it. I can also set other parts of this object to different emission colors. For example, let's say I want to change the rings to be emissive as well. What I can do here is set another emission color, right? If I want to change the emission strength for this specific group of faces, since I cannot change the emission strength per face, what I could do here is actually change the value of this color to a darker tone, and that will simulate an emission strength effect, right? That's one trick. But actually, this object here does not need emission at all. So I'm just gonna get rid of emission. And as you can see, the UV channel for that emission is gone, and the shader nodes are also removed as well. Now I want to talk about other operators here. We have already seen the select by attribute. What we can do is also separate by attribute, and that is similar to pressing P and separate by material, except that we will be doing that by separate by attribute. So I can click in separate, and as you can see now we have several mesh objects, and each one is an individual object using its specific attributes. Now, the other thing that we can do here is transfer. Transfer is important when you have one object using the Atlasflow, and during your workflow you are actually working on a new object with its own material, and you want to be adding this object to this Atlasflow object here and still keep it as one material. So you can join it. As you can see, this is using two materials, but if you click clean, it's going to misconfigure this mesh. So what you need to do is first click transfer to be able to transfer the values from any other material here to the Atlasflow. And once you do that, then you can press clean and it's going to preserve the original properties. Then let me just go back. Then the other thing you can do here is reset this object, and what that's going to do is basically remove the Atlasflow and any UV channels for this Atlasflow material and return the original PBR materials for each group of faces. So as you can see here, we still have one object, but it does have several materials. The materials basically use the name of the object and the suffix 01, 02, 03, and so on. And the Atlasflow material is gone, and the Atlasflow UV channels are gone as well. So now you could separate by material, or you could do whatever you want here. So as you can see, this is a pretty non-destructive workflow. You can go back and forth with original PBR materials or the Atlasflow as you wish. So for example, I'm just gonna add the Atlasflow material back and clean my object. And we are back again to the Atlasflow without using Ctrl Z or anything. It's just a pretty non-destructive workflow. So next thing I want to be talking about are the update sockets and update values. The update values specifically is needed because, as you can see, when I click this blue mesh here, it does not update the values in the UI panel. And that's because Blender does not know when I click a face. It can do operations based on the face that I have selected or the group of faces, but it does not know when I click it. So in order to be able to update these values here, you need to press update values, and it automatically updated the UI values based on your active face. If you select, for example, the entire thing and another active face, but the active face is actually from the glass, and you click to update values, it's going to update the values with the glass values and also update the values of every selected face. So that's not ideal here, but if you want to select a group of faces and you want to add that same PBR property to this group of faces here, keeping the active selection there, you can always update values and it's going to change the values of this group of faces to the active face one. So that's the update values operation. Now, similarly, we also have the update sockets. And by sockets, I mean the sockets of the principal BSDF. So there are two scenarios here. For example, let's say we manually changed it. We removed the base color. We changed the alpha to be here. We changed the blue to be maybe the specular IOR level. And the UI here is not updated accordingly. So what we can do here is press update sockets, and it updated the properties accordingly. Now let me go back. The other case is, for example, we have more than one object in our scene using the Atlasflow. Let me add another object. And as you can see, these Atlas flows, each Atlas flow material here is different. So if I want to go back to this object and edit this object, first thing I need to do is actually update the sockets to reflect the actual configuration in this Atlas flow material. Now let me talk about the export process to GLB or DLTF. So GLTF 2.0 unfortunately does not support the alpha texture to be separate from the base color texture. So when you export this to GLB, it's going to automatically bake the alpha texture into the alpha channel of the RGBA base color texture. And therefore they will be forced to use the same UV channel, and the texture will be forced to carry alpha properties and alpha values. That's going to completely misconfigure the look of the object. So currently the only solution for that, or the only workaround, is to export any mesh that is using alpha properties separately from the rest of the opaque object. So I'm going to be showing both cases to you so that you can understand what I'm talking about. So I'm going to separate the mesh using alpha. Now, since this is using only a few properties here, we actually don't need the... Let me first rename this. And here we don't need the base color. We don't need... Actually, we only need the alpha. So roughness can be set to nearly 0, metallic a little bit higher, and color I'm gonna put it nearly black and maintain the alpha values from the atlas. And for the opaque, let me update the sockets here and actually remove the alpha. So as you can see, all the properties are preserved. The model is looking pretty good. The different PBR properties are all preserved in our object. as if I load the object sharing the alpha properties in the same material, we have a little problem here, and let me show you more visually. If we select the base color Atlasflow texture, we can see that the alpha is baked into the RGB, resulting in something like this. So that's why we need the alpha object to be separate from the opaque object when using Atlasflow. So that's it for the Atlasflow tutorial. Thank you for checking it out. If you have any questions, feedback, or suggestions, feel free to reach me out through the Blender Market chat, and I'll see you soon.